The Dyatlov Pass Incident. Part 1. Into the Frozen Unknown. The wind has always carried secrets across the endless wilderness. Some disappear into the trees. Others remain trapped beneath the snow forever. Tonight, we travel back to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in modern history. A story so unsettling that even after more than 60 years, no one can say with certainty what truly happened. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another relaxing mystery, historical sleep story, or true unsolved case. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Winter in the Soviet Union was unlike anything most people could imagine. It wasn't merely cold. It was a living force. Entire forests disappeared beneath endless blankets of snow. Rivers became frozen highways. Mountains transformed into silent white giants where only the strongest dared to travel. Among those mountains stood the northern Urals, a remote, beautiful, and unforgiving wilderness stretching across Russia like an endless frozen kingdom. During the winter of 1959, very few people ventured into these mountains. Those who did usually returned with stories of breathtaking beauty. Or not at all. Long before newspapers around the world printed headlines about the mystery. Before investigators searched desperately through deep snow. Before countless theories emerged. There were simply 9 young adventurers. 9 ordinary people. Each with dreams, ambitions, families waiting for them at home. None of them could have imagined they were about to become part of one of history's greatest mysteries. Their leader was a confident and experienced university student named Igor Dyatlov. He was only 23 years old. Calm, intelligent, disciplined. Friends admired his ability to stay calm even in dangerous situations. If someone knew how to survive in the wilderness, it was Igor. He loved mountains. He loved adventure. But more than anything, he loved proving that impossible journeys could be conquered through preparation and teamwork. Months before the expedition, Igor carefully planned every detail. Maps were studied, routes measured, equipment checked again and again. Nothing was left to chance. The goal of the expedition was ambitious. The group intended to ski hundreds of kilometers across some of the harshest terrain in the Soviet Union before climbing a mountain known locally as Kholat Syakhl. The name came from the indigenous Mansi people. Translated into English, it meant Mountain of the Dead. At first glance, it sounded like something from a horror novel. Yet the name had an ordinary explanation. Legend suggested hunters rarely found animals there because the harsh weather made survival nearly impossible. Still, names have power. And over the years, that lonely mountain would earn its terrifying reputation. Igor began assembling his team. Every member had experience with difficult winter expeditions. They weren't reckless thrill seekers. They were skilled hikers, engineers, university students, and athletes. People trained to survive freezing temperatures. People who understood risk. The first was Zinaida Kolmogorova. Bright. Energetic. Always smiling. Friends described her as someone capable of lifting everyone's spirits, even during exhausting journeys. She loved hiking more than comfort. Adventure more than routine. Then came Yuri Doroshenko. Strong. Confident. Fearless. Stories circulated among friends that he had once scared away a bear during an earlier expedition. Whether entirely true or slightly exaggerated, no one doubted his courage. Rustam Slobodin joined next. Quiet. Determined. A talented engineer who approached problems logically. He wasn't the loudest member of the group. But when difficult decisions had to be made, people listened. Lyudmila Dubinina brought remarkable resilience. She had already survived serious injuries during previous expeditions but refused to abandon her passion for exploration. Pain never seemed capable of stopping her. Alexander Kolevatov was fascinated by science. thoughtful, curious. He often examined everything around him with careful attention. Nothing escaped his observation. Semyon Zolotaryov was older than the others. 38 years old. A veteran of World War II. His life experiences made him different from the younger students. Yet he shared their love for the mountains. He had joined the expedition shortly before departure, making him something of a mystery even within the group. Then there were Yuri Krivonishenko, known for his humor, and Georgy Krivonishenko, often called simply Georgy by friends, whose cheerful personality made long expeditions feel shorter. Finally, Nikolai Thibault-Brignolle, athletic, strong, reliable, someone everyone trusted. Together, they formed an exceptional team. 9 experienced hikers. 9 intelligent young people. 9 individuals prepared for one of the Soviet Union's highest expedition certifications. It was supposed to be another successful journey. Nothing more. Families hugged them goodbye. Friends wished them luck. Photographs captured smiling faces wearing thick winter clothing. No fear. No uncertainty. Only excitement. The train carrying the group traveled through snow-covered towns where smoke drifted from chimneys into gray winter skies. Passengers laughed, played music, shared food. The atmosphere felt warm despite the freezing temperatures outside. Someone brought a camera. Photographs documented nearly every stage of the adventure. Those pictures still exist today. When people look at them, they see happiness frozen in time. Smiles. Jokes. Friends enjoying what they believed would become another unforgettable expedition. None of them knew those photographs would later become haunting historical evidence. After leaving the train, the group continued by truck toward the final inhabited settlements before entering the wilderness. Roads became rough. Villages became smaller. Civilization slowly disappeared behind them. Eventually they reached the tiny settlement of Vizhay. It represented the last significant community before endless wilderness. Local workers watched the young hikers organize their equipment. Heavy backpacks, skis, axes, cameras, warm clothing, everything necessary for survival. The hikers joked with locals, laughed, took more photographs. Their confidence never faded. One member of the original expedition, Yuri Yudin, suddenly developed severe health problems. Old medical conditions made continuing impossible. It was a heartbreaking decision. He wanted desperately to remain with his friends. But every painful step reminded him that his body could no longer continue. Reluctantly, he said goodbye. His companions hugged him, promising they would meet again after the expedition. As Yuri watched them disappear into the snowy distance, none of them realized something extraordinary had just happened. His illness had saved his life. He would become the expedition's only survivor. For decades afterward, that final farewell haunted him. He often wondered, what if he had ignored the pain? What if he had continued walking? Would he have shared their mysterious fate? Or could one more person have changed history? No one can answer that question. The remaining 9 hikers pressed onward. Snow crunched beneath their skis. Cold air filled their lungs. Towering pine forests surrounded them like silent guardians. Sometimes they sang songs. Sometimes they joked. Sometimes they simply admired the breathtaking beauty of untouched nature. Their diaries described excitement rather than fear. The weather was cold, but manageable. The journey remained difficult, yet entirely within their abilities. Every evening they pitched tents, cooked meals, recorded notes, took photographs. Their routine reflected experienced explorers. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing hinted that they were approaching one of history's darkest mysteries. Yet, far ahead, beyond the forests, beyond frozen rivers, beyond the rolling hills, a lonely mountain waited beneath endless clouds. A place where silence ruled, where storms arrived without warning, where temperatures could kill within minutes. a place whose ancient name whispered across generations. The Mountain of the Dead. And somewhere beyond that frozen horizon, the mystery had already begun. The snow was waiting. Part 2, The Last Journey. The morning arrived quietly. A pale sun struggled to rise above the endless forests of the northern Ural Mountains, casting a soft silver glow across the untouched snow. It was beautiful in a way that only the wilderness could be, peaceful, vast, and completely indifferent to the tiny figures making their way through it. The 9 hikers packed their equipment with practiced efficiency. Every movement had become routine. Roll the sleeping bags. Secure the backpacks. Check the skis. Tighten every strap. No one complained. No one questioned the journey. This was exactly where they wanted to be. The mountains rewarded determination, and each member of the group believed they had prepared for every possible challenge. Their cameras continued capturing moments along the trail. Some photographs showed laughter. Others showed friends helping one another climb steep slopes. One image revealed someone playfully pretending to lose balance in the snow while the others laughed behind the camera. Looking at those photographs today feels almost surreal. Knowing what would eventually happen makes every smile seem heartbreaking. At the time, however, there was no fear. Only friendship. Only adventure. Only the quiet confidence of 9 experienced explorers. The deeper they traveled into the wilderness, the more civilization disappeared behind them. The forests became thicker. The valleys wider. The silence heavier. There were no roads. No villages. No distant lights glowing after sunset. Only snow. Wind. Trees. And mountains stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Sometimes the weather shifted without warning. Clear skies suddenly disappeared beneath dark clouds. Strong gusts swept across the ridges, throwing fine snow into the air until visibility dropped to only a few meters. Experienced hikers knew these conditions well. The mountains always demanded respect. One careless mistake could become fatal. But the group remained disciplined. Igor constantly checked the map and compass. Every few hours they compared their location with the planned route. Progress was slower than expected because of the deep snow, but nobody appeared worried. The expedition was still on schedule. Each evening they pitched their large canvas tent together. The routine never changed. Some collected firewood. Others prepared dinner. Someone melted snow into drinking water. Afterward they sat together, warming themselves with hot tea while sharing stories from previous expeditions. Laughter echoed through the cold air. Outside, darkness swallowed the mountains. Inside the tent, life felt wonderfully ordinary. One evening, Zenaida wrote in her diary about how beautiful the wilderness looked beneath the fading sunlight. Another member joked about how difficult it would be to explain to friends back home why they voluntarily spent holidays in temperatures far below freezing. Their journals contained humor, optimism, hope. Nothing suggested growing fear. Nothing hinted at danger waiting ahead. The following days became increasingly demanding. Fresh snowfall made skiing more difficult. Strong winds forced the group to lean forward as they climbed higher into the mountains. Every step required effort. Backpacks weighed heavily on tired shoulders. Breath formed clouds that instantly disappeared into the freezing air. Still, no one suggested turning back. This expedition represented one of the highest hiking certifications available in the Soviet Union. Completing it successfully would prove their skill and endurance. Failure simply wasn't part of the plan. As they climbed higher, the trees slowly vanished. The protection of the forest gave way to open slopes covered only by snow. Without the trees blocking the wind, temperatures felt dramatically colder. Powerful gusts roared across the mountainside. The landscape became almost otherworldly. Everything was white. Sky, ground, horizon. At times it became impossible to distinguish one from the other. This phenomenon, known as a whiteout, could confuse even experienced hikers. Landmarks disappeared. Distances became impossible to judge. Directions suddenly felt uncertain. It was during one of these difficult weather changes that the expedition appears to have drifted slightly away from its intended route. Whether because of poor visibility, strong winds, or simple human error, the group found themselves approaching the eastern slope of Koletsyakal, the Mountain of the Dead. Today that name sounds almost prophetic. But for the hikers, it meant little more than another destination on the map. There was no legend haunting their minds. No belief that the mountain was cursed. Only another obstacle to overcome. By late afternoon, the weather worsened again. Snow blew sideways across the mountainside. The wind howled with increasing strength. Visibility continued shrinking. Travel became exhausting. The hikers now faced an important decision. They could descend into the nearby forest, where trees would provide shelter from the wind. Or they could camp on the exposed slope and continue climbing the next morning. No written explanation survives telling us why they chose the mountainside. Perhaps they believed descending into the forest would cost valuable time. Perhaps they wanted an early start toward the summit. Perhaps they simply underestimated how severe the storm would become overnight. Whatever the reason, that single decision would become one of the most debated choices in the history of mountaineering. Working together, they began pitching their tent directly into the snowy slope. It was not an easy task. The wind fought every movement. Snow filled their footprints almost immediately. They carved a flat platform into the mountainside before securing the tent with skis and poles. Everything about their actions suggested calm professionalism. Nothing indicated panic. Nothing suggested they believed they were in immediate danger. Inside the tent, the atmosphere slowly warmed. Heavy boots were removed. Outer clothing dried near small heat sources. Equipment was organized carefully. The group had survived another difficult day. From all appearances, it was just another ordinary night. Someone likely prepared dinner. Someone probably joked about the terrible weather outside. Perhaps they discussed the next day's route. Perhaps they laughed about how miserable the wind sounded beyond the canvas walls. No recording exists. No diary entry tells us their final conversations. The only witnesses were the mountains themselves. Outside, darkness settled completely. The temperature plunged far below freezing. The wind screamed across the empty slopes with terrifying force. Snow drifted higher around the tent. Inside, 9 experienced hikers settled into their sleeping positions. Safe. Warm enough. Together. They had no idea that within hours, something would happen so shocking, so sudden, that every plan they had made would disappear forever. Because sometime during that long winter night, for reasons still unknown, 9 people would abandon the safety of their shelter, not through the entrance, but by cutting their way out of the tent itself, leaving behind boots, warm clothing, food, equipment, and nearly every chance of survival. The mountain remained silent. The snow continued falling, and whatever happened next would become one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Part 3. The night no one witnessed. Night had completely claimed the mountain. Beyond the thin canvas walls of the tent, the world had vanished into darkness. The temperature had fallen to nearly -30 degrees Celsius. Every breath outside would freeze almost instantly. The wind roared across the barren slope, carrying fine snow through the air like thousands of tiny needles. Inside the tent, however, there was still a sense of normality. The hikers had survived countless cold nights before. This one should have been no different. Their boots rested neatly near the entrance. Heavy coats were arranged within reach. Their backpacks remained packed. Food supplies were organized carefully. The camera equipment lay safely stored. Everything suggested preparation. Everything suggested experience. Nothing suggested panic. And yet, something changed. Exactly what happened inside that tent has remained one of history's greatest unanswered questions. There were no survivors. No witnesses. No final diary entry. No desperate message scratched onto paper. Only silence. Investigators would later reconstruct the scene as best they could. The evidence told a strange story. At some point during the night, the hikers suddenly decided, or were somehow forced, to leave the tent immediately. Not by opening the entrance, but by cutting several large slashes through the side of the canvas from the inside. It was an extraordinary decision. Experienced mountaineers protect their tents at all costs. The tent is survival. It is warmth. It is shelter. Destroying it in the middle of a freezing winter night makes almost no sense. Unless they believed remaining inside was even more dangerous. That single mystery has puzzled investigators for decades. What could have frightened 9 experienced hikers so badly that they abandoned nearly everything they owned? Outside the tent, the mountain was merciless. The snow reflected almost no light. The wind erased footprints within hours. Temperatures were deadly. Even standing still for long could mean certain death. Yet the footprints investigators later discovered painted an even stranger picture. The tracks leading away from the tent were not chaotic. They were not scattered in every direction. Instead, most appeared surprisingly orderly. Some footprints belonged to people wearing socks. Others appeared barefoot. A few showed only one boot. There were no signs of running. No evidence of a violent struggle. It looked almost as though the group had walked calmly away from the only shelter they had. That fact has baffled experts ever since. If they were escaping immediate danger, why weren't they running? If they had time to walk, why didn't they stop to collect their coats? Their boots? Their supplies? The questions seemed endless. The answers? Nowhere to be found. As the hikers descended the slope, visibility would have been almost non-existent. The forest below offered the only protection from the brutal wind. Perhaps reaching the trees seemed like the safest choice. Perhaps they believed whatever threatened them would remain on the mountainside. Or perhaps they expected to return within minutes. Whatever they believed, they never made it back. The trail through the snow stretched nearly a mile toward the edge of the forest. Every step farther from the tent reduced their chances of survival. Without proper clothing, the cold would begin attacking the body almost immediately. First came numb fingers, then burning pain. Soon afterward, the mind itself began slowing. Simple decisions became difficult. Judgment faded. The cold was not merely uncomfortable. It was an invisible predator, one that hunted patiently, without mercy. Eventually, the group reached the shelter of the trees. The towering pines blocked much of the wind. Compared to the exposed mountainside, the forest almost felt calm. Here, they attempted something remarkable. Evidence later showed they built a small fire beneath a large cedar tree. Broken branches reached several meters above the ground. Investigators concluded that someone had climbed the tree. But why? Perhaps they were searching for the tent. Perhaps they were trying to see through the darkness. Perhaps they feared something was moving across the slope. No one knows. The fire itself was small. Far too small to keep 9 people alive for long. It offered hope, but very little warmth. Nearby, investigators would later find the remains of 2 hikers beneath that great cedar. They wore only light clothing. The freezing temperatures had already claimed them. Yet even in their final moments, the evidence suggested they had stayed beside the fire together. They had not abandoned one another. Elsewhere, several footprints indicated that some members of the group attempted to return to the tent. This decision may have been driven by hope. The storm might have eased. The danger, whatever it was, might have passed. Perhaps they believed they could recover their equipment and survive until morning. But the mountain had other plans. One by one, they collapsed in the snow, not far from the route leading back uphill. It was as though they had fought against the freezing darkness until their strength finally disappeared. And still, the strangest discoveries were yet to come. Because while some of the hikers lay near the cedar tree, and others lay scattered between the forest and the tent, 4 members of the expedition had vanished completely. Weeks would pass before anyone found them. When they finally did, the mystery would become even more disturbing. Their bodies were hidden beneath deep snow inside a nearby ravine. Some had suffered severe internal injuries, broken ribs, massive chest trauma, a fractured skull. Yet strangely, there were few external wounds. It was as if enormous force had acted upon them, without leaving the expected marks. Even seasoned investigators struggled to explain it. Adding to the mystery, one victim was missing her tongue. Others had missing soft tissue. At first glance, the discoveries sounded horrifying. But later experts suggested that natural decomposition, flowing water beneath the snow, and scavenging animals could explain much of that damage. Still, to the public, the details fueled terrifying rumors. Stories of monsters, secret weapons, unknown creatures, visitors from the sky. Each new rumor made the mystery grow larger, far stranger, far darker. Meanwhile, far away from the mountain, the families waited. Days passed, then weeks. The expedition should have returned. Letters should have arrived. But nothing came. At first, no one panicked. Winter expeditions were often delayed by storms. Experienced hikers sometimes arrived several days late. But eventually, the silence became impossible to ignore. Parents grew anxious. Friends contacted the university. Officials realized something was terribly wrong. Search teams began assembling. Aircraft prepared for reconnaissance. Rescue volunteers gathered maps of the northern Urals. No one yet knew that the answers waiting on Kholat Syakhl would only create more questions. The search had finally begun. And with it, one of history's most haunting investigations. Part 4. The search that uncovered a nightmare. The days passed slowly. At first, no one believed anything terrible had happened. The expedition had been scheduled to send a telegram once they reached the village of Vizhay after completing their route. Delays were common during winter expeditions, especially in the unforgiving Ural Mountains. 1 extra day. Then 2. Then 5. Still, there was no message. No telegram. No letter. No sign of the 9 hikers. At the university, friends began asking questions. Had the group taken a different route? Had severe weather forced them to wait? Or had something gone terribly wrong? As concern grew, the families of the hikers demanded action. Eventually, Soviet authorities approved a search operation. At first, the mission seemed straightforward. 9 experienced hikers were missing. Find their trail. Locate their camp. Bring them home. No one imagined that the search itself would become part of the legend. The first search teams consisted mainly of volunteers, friends, students, fellow mountaineers, people who personally knew the missing hikers. Many believed they would find the group waiting inside a snow-covered tent, delayed by bad weather but otherwise unharmed. Aircraft flew above the endless white landscape. Pilots scanned the mountains below for even the smallest sign of human activity. From thousands of feet in the air, everything looked identical. White hills, frozen rivers, dark forests, countless valleys buried beneath snow. Finding a single tent was like searching for a grain of sand in an ocean. Days passed without success. The weather remained brutal. Strong winds complicated every flight. Searchers on the ground struggled through waist-deep snow, carrying heavy equipment, while temperatures remained far below freezing. Still, they refused to give up. Then, on February 26, 1959, everything changed. One of the volunteer teams spotted something unusual on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. A dark object partially buried beneath drifting snow. As they approached, the shape slowly became clear. It was a tent. The expedition's tent. But something felt terribly wrong. The tent wasn't standing normally. It had partially collapsed beneath the snow. One side sagged toward the ground. The fabric fluttered violently in the freezing wind. The searchers hurried forward, expecting to find exhausted hikers inside. Instead, they found silence. The tent was completely empty. No voices. No movement. Nothing. Inside lay almost everything the hikers would have needed to survive. Sleeping bags remained in place. Backpacks rested against the canvas. Food supplies were untouched. Maps. Journals. Cameras. Extra clothing. Medical supplies. Even boots. Many pairs of boots. The searchers stared in disbelief. Experienced hikers would never leave behind their boots in temperatures this deadly. Not voluntarily. Not unless they believed they had absolutely no choice. Then someone noticed something even stranger. The side of the tent had been sliced open. Several long cuts ran through the canvas. Investigators would later determine that the cuts had been made from inside the tent, not from outside. Whatever had happened, the hikers had escaped through those slashes instead of using the normal entrance. That discovery immediately changed the entire investigation. This was no ordinary accident. Outside the tent, searchers began examining the snow. To their amazement, footprints were still visible. Not many. Just enough. The frozen conditions had preserved parts of the trail. 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent. They headed downhill toward the forest. Some belonged to people wearing only socks. Others appeared barefoot. A few showed the outline of a single boot. No one seemed fully dressed. Even stranger, the footprints showed no obvious signs of panic. The group had not scattered wildly. They had remained together. Walking. Not running. Slowly disappearing into the darkness below. One of the rescuers reportedly stood in silence for several moments before quietly saying, "They walked away." Those simple words echoed through the frozen mountains. Because everyone present understood what that meant. 9 experienced hikers had willingly left their only shelter. On one of the coldest nights imaginable. The question remained, why? The search teams followed the footprints downhill. Every step filled them with growing unease. The forest loomed ahead like a dark wall against the endless snow. Eventually, they reached a massive cedar tree. Its branches stretched high above the frozen ground. At its base, the first bodies were discovered. 2 young men, lying beside the remains of a small fire. Their clothing was minimal. Far too little to survive the freezing night. The fire itself had long since burned out. Only blackened wood remained. The cedar tree revealed another disturbing clue. Several branches high above the ground had been broken. Freshly broken. Someone had climbed the tree. The bark bore scratches. The trunk showed signs of desperate movement. But why? Were they trying to look back toward the tent? Searching for light? Watching for danger? Or hiding from something? No answer came. The silence of the forest revealed nothing. The search continued between the cedar tree and the tent. Several hundred meters away, another body appeared beneath the snow. Then another. Then another. 3 hikers were found scattered across the slope. Each seemed to be facing uphill, toward the tent, toward the place they had abandoned. Investigators believed they had attempted to return, perhaps after realizing the danger outside was even greater than whatever had driven them away. Perhaps they hoped to recover their clothing, their food, their shelter. They never made it. The mountain claimed them one by one. The cold had been relentless. Yet something still didn't fit. 5 hikers had now been found, but 4 were still missing. It was as though they had simply vanished. Weeks turned into months. Search efforts intensified. Snow melted slowly as winter gave way to spring. Only then did the final discovery emerge. It was hidden inside a deep ravine nearly 75 meters from the cedar tree, beneath several meters of compacted snow. The remaining 4 hikers were finally located. Unlike the others, these victims wore more clothing. Some garments clearly belonged to the hikers who had died first. This suggested that the survivors had removed clothing from their fallen companions in a desperate attempt to stay warm. It was a heartbreaking sign of human instinct, not cruelty. Survival in unbearable conditions. Yet the medical examination would soon reveal injuries unlike anything investigators expected. Massive fractures, crushed ribs, a shattered skull. Injuries so severe that one expert would later compare the force to the impact of a high-speed car crash. And yet, there were almost no external wounds, no deep cuts, no extensive bruising, no obvious signs of a violent fight. It was a contradiction that would haunt the investigation forever. How could such devastating injuries exist without corresponding damage to the skin? As word of these discoveries spread through the Soviet Union, whispers began. Some spoke of secret military experiments. Others believed the hikers had encountered escaped prisoners. Some even claimed the mountain was cursed. The rumors grew faster than the investigation itself. And before long, the Dyatlov Pass Incident would become far more than a missing persons case. It would become one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. But the most shocking revelations were still waiting inside the autopsy reports. Part 5: The Strange Evidence. When the remaining 4 hikers were discovered beneath deep snow months later, investigators hoped the mystery would finally be solved. Instead, it became even more confusing. The autopsies revealed that several hikers had died from hypothermia, which was expected in such extreme conditions. But others had suffered shocking injuries. One had a fractured skull, while 2 others had multiple broken ribs. The force behind these injuries was compared to a powerful car crash, yet there were very few external wounds. It was as if something had crushed them without tearing the skin. Another disturbing detail involved Lyudmila Dubinina, whose tongue was missing. Although this fueled terrifying rumors, modern forensic experts believe natural decomposition and scavenging animals are the most likely explanation after her body remained under snow for months. Investigators also found small traces of radioactive material on some items of clothing. The levels were low, but unusual enough to spark endless speculation. Some believed it pointed to secret military testing, while others argued the contamination may have come from previous work environments. Despite months of investigation, there was no evidence of another group, no signs of a violent attack, and no proof of what had driven the hikers from their tent. In the end, Soviet officials closed the case with a mysterious conclusion. They stated that the group had died because of an unknown compelling force. Those 4 words only deepened the mystery. More than 60 years later, people around the world are still asking the same question. What happened on that freezing mountain? Part 6: The Most Likely Explanations. Over the decades, investigators, scientists, and historians have proposed dozens of theories to explain the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Some sound believable, while others seem like scenes from a horror movie. The most widely accepted explanation is a small avalanche or snow slab. According to this theory, a heavy layer of snow shifted during the night, making the hikers believe a larger avalanche was about to strike. Fearing for their lives, they quickly cut their way out of the tent and moved downhill. In the darkness and freezing temperatures, they became separated and were unable to return. Another theory involves powerful winds. Researchers have suggested that unusual wind patterns around the mountain created a terrifying low-frequency sound known as infrasound. Although humans cannot clearly hear it, some studies suggest it can cause intense anxiety, panic, and confusion. If true, the hikers may have fled the tent in fear without fully understanding why. Some experts believe the severe injuries were caused later, after several hikers fell into the snow-covered ravine. Hidden rocks beneath the deep snow could have produced the broken ribs and skull fractures found during the autopsies. Despite years of study, no single theory answers every question. Each explains part of the mystery but leaves important details unresolved. And because science has never provided a complete answer, many people began searching elsewhere. In legends, in conspiracy theories, and even in stories of things that should not exist. Part 7. The Darkest Theories. When a mystery has no clear answer, imagination often fills the silence. Over the years, the Dyatlov Pass Incident has inspired some of the strangest theories ever proposed. While none of them have been proven, they continue to fascinate millions of people. One of the most famous claims is that the hikers encountered a Yeti, or another unknown creature hiding in the Ural Mountains. Supporters of this theory point to the group's sudden escape from the tent and the unexplained injuries. However, no physical evidence of such a creature was ever found. Another popular theory involves UFOs. Around the same time as the incident, several people reported seeing mysterious glowing lights in the night sky near the mountains. Some believe the hikers witnessed an unexplained aerial phenomenon that frightened them into leaving the tent. Others argued the lights were likely natural events or distant military activity. Perhaps the most persistent theory is that the Soviet military was secretly testing experimental weapons. Some believe explosions or classified technology caused panic among the hikers and led to their deaths. The traces of radiation found on a few pieces of clothing only fueled these suspicions. Yet, after decades of research, no official evidence has confirmed this idea. Each theory offers a possible explanation, but none can answer every question. The mountain has remained silent. And the truth, if it still exists, may be buried forever beneath the snow. Part 8. A mystery that refuses to die. More than 6 decades have passed since 9 young hikers entered the Ural Mountains and never returned. Yet the Dyatlov Pass Incident continues to captivate people around the world. In recent years, modern investigators reopened the case using satellite images, weather records, computer simulations, and avalanche research. Many experts now believe that a rare snow slab avalanche, combined with freezing temperatures, darkness, and desperate survival decisions, is the most likely explanation. While it answers many questions, it still cannot explain every detail with complete certainty. Perhaps that is why the story refuses to fade. It is not only a mystery about how 9 people died. It is a reminder of how powerful nature can be, and how quickly even the most experienced adventurers can find themselves in an impossible situation. Maybe the real answer was lost forever on that freezing night. Or maybe one small piece of evidence still lies hidden beneath the snow, waiting to be discovered. Until that day comes, the Dyatlov Pass Incident will remain one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, a story that continues to haunt the imagination of everyone who hears it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next relaxing mystery and bedtime documentary. Thank you for listening. Sleep well. And remember, some mountains never give up their secrets. The end. As our journey through the Dyatlov Pass mystery comes to an end, one question still lingers in the frozen silence. What truly happened on that lonely mountain? Was it simply the unforgiving power of nature, or was there something more that no investigation has ever been able to explain? Perhaps we will never know. And maybe that is exactly why this story continues to fascinate people more than 60 years later. The mountain keeps its secrets, buried beneath snow and time, refusing to reveal the complete truth. If you enjoyed this documentary and would like to hear more mysterious, historical, and relaxing bedtime stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next adventure into the unknown. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, sleep peacefully, stay curious, and remember, some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Good night.